Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talked to James Temperton of Wired about the current state and future of Airbnb given the novel coronavirus. Then we chat with OneZero's Morrone about ethical book buying, toilet paper, and bidets. Before we round things out with a conversation about how you can still support musicians by streaming their concerts online, and the FCC opening up the 6 gigahertz band to all of our Wi-Fi wonders. There's so much to check out on this week's episode of Tech News Weekly, so stay tuned. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. You're focused on security, but are your employees? Well, LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless, whether they're working in the office or remote. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 130, recorded Thursday, April 23rd, 2020.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Expressvpn. Now that a lot of you are working from home, it's even more important to choose a VPN you trust. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/TNW. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Mikah Sargent.
I'm Jason Howell. We did not put our heads together to actually find shirts that match each other, but I'm happy to say that it happened anyways.
It did,
whatever that's
because
worth.
We're in each other's hearts and minds in these trying times.
That's right. If we can't share an office, at least we could share a color of a shirt.
But not a shirt.
Right, but not a shirt. I know, although you can borrow this shirt if you like it. It's cool. Let's jump into tech news instead of shirt news. Let's talk a little bit about Airbnb. I'm a big fan of Airbnb, used it a ton for a number of different trips that I've taken the past many years. So I've really enjoyed myself through their service. No doubt, many industries have been dramatically impacted by the restrictions that are occurring due to the coronavirus. Travel, of course, has seen a devastating impact, and Airbnb was kind of thriving, was doing pretty good, was on track for this year to be a really big year for Airbnb with plans to go public. Now its hosts are calling this moment the Airbnb Apocalypse. And joining us to talk about this is James Temperton from Wired. How's it going, James?
Hi there. Not too bad. How's it going?
Excellent. It's awesome to get you on. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us. So I guess, first of all, let's start with kind of how, like, the pre-coronavirus Airbnb, things were going pretty strongly for them. They had big plans, ambitions for 2020. Kind of set the stage there a little bit.
Yeah, things were going great. This was going to be Airbnb's year, right? It was the year, as you said, when it planned to go public. Pretty recently, it was valued at between $50 and $70 billion. This is a startup that the industry has been waiting for to go public for a number of years. So this was the moment. Everything was looking pretty rosy. Airbnb had taken its sweet time about going public. It was just about to make the move, and then along came coronavirus.
Dun, dun, dun. And of course, here we are. The travel industry basically collapsed, along with many, many industries, but travel has been hit very heavily. So things have obviously shifted for Airbnb. Where is that impact seen most of all? I mean, really, it only survives if people are traveling and actually staying in these units. What is happening right now to their bottom line?
It's a similar story to what we're seeing with airlines, right? So new bookings on Airbnb were down 85% in recent weeks in March. Cancellation rates are down to 90%. Revenue generated by Airbnb's platform as a whole, so that's the money that hosts are making, was down 25% year on year, wiping out $1 billion in bookings. Airbnb is absolutely huge, but with much of the world on lockdown and likely to be on lockdown for a number of weeks or months to come, those numbers are unlikely to pick up anytime soon. So this is an absolute disaster for Airbnb.
And Airbnb has also secured some kind of emergency investment relief. Is that right? I think I read I read a figure in the billions, I think.
Yeah, it's taken on $1 billion of investment and also $1 billion in senior debt. So senior debt is debt that overrides and takes precedent over its existing debt. So basically, Airbnb's got its security blanket in place. So it should be okay. It might not be if this pandemic keeps going as long as some people are estimating. But for the time being, Airbnb's all right with that money in place. But obviously, it's not making any money. It takes a cut of all of these bookings. That's the only way it makes any cash. And with very few or basically no people staying in any Airbnbs all around the world, it's closed. It's closed for business. And this is really, really bad. Yeah, really bad. Now, a large part of what you write about and kind of part of what drew me to this, because I'm also very interested, just outside of technology, I happen to be very interested in investment, real estate, that sort of stuff. So this was kind of like both worlds kind of coming into one. What you write about a lot in your piece is about the investor community, about how there are a lot of investors who have bought up real estate specifically because they know that they can make a lot of money using the Airbnb model to rent out a nightly or weekly or even just over the weekend or whatever. They can make an insane amount of money. How is this trickling down to those investors? I mean, this really has the potential to be crippling for so many people. Yeah, absolutely. So to understand the scale of the problem for Airbnb and its hosts, you have to think of Airbnb as more of a hotel chain, right? So Airbnb has 7 million listings around the world. That's listings, not individual rooms. So an awful lot more than 7 million people could be staying in an Airbnb on any given night. That makes it bigger than the top 10 hotel chains in the world combined, which have 5.48 million guest rooms. So Airbnb is a really, really big hotel operator. The coronavirus crisis wouldn't be bad news for your sort of individual with a spare room or a second home earning a bit of extra income, which is what Airbnb sort of presents itself as. It's the sharing economy platform. But Airbnb isn't that. Most listings on Airbnb are owned by people with more than one listing, many of them with several dozen listings, and they're running them as de facto hotels. We've all stayed in them. They have all those telltale signs that no one actually lives there. But Airbnb's allowed this problem to get pretty big on its platform, so much so that in most markets, these kinds of hosts outnumber the sharing economy, spare room kinds of hosts. Now, the problem with this is those investors don't actually own the properties, or if they do, they likely have mortgages to pay on them. But for the most part, what Airbnb has enabled is this gold rush. You can get 3 to 5 times the long-term rental yield by listing a property on Airbnb. This is a great get-rich quick scheme. The problem is it opens you up to huge liabilities the second you're unable to get people into the properties that you've rented. So it's rental arbitrage. You take one property, take a loan, rent out another one, and then you sublet them through Airbnb and Booking.com, and you can charge a way higher nightly rate. That's absolutely fine, but now no one is traveling, no one's going on holidays, no one's going on business trips, no one's in those rooms, but the bills are still coming in, and someone's got to pay them. Yeah, especially in the real estate, investing world, it's hard when you see those dollar signs on something like this. Like, it's very known that renting these types of units out through Airbnb, like you said, it's a great markup. You can make a whole lot of money. No one ever really thinks about the reality or the potential, the prospects of, let's say, a pandemic suddenly stopping worldwide travel. It's something that's hardly ever, if ever, happened in any sort of modern time example. So that never factors into the equation. And then here you are. It's like the tower falls over. You even you call it in your article kind of like a Ponzi scheme, essentially, because it's all built on the backs of the deals that came before it, right? So if one part of the equation falters at the bottom, the whole thing falls down, and that's kind of where we're at. As far as those investors are concerned, the people that are running these units, how are there ways that they're kind of shifting their strategy to help protect themselves? Is Airbnb helping them to protect their assets as far as this is concerned? A good way to think of the pandemic, right, is it's a bit of a stress test for businesses. So as you said, there's this Ponzi scheme element to this, and businesses that haven't been built well won't pass the stress test of this pandemic. So for an awful lot of these Airbnb tests, Airbnb hosts, this really is a disaster. In terms of what they can do, that's the problem. They can't really do a lot. So some of them have started advertising coronavirus-proof Airbnb bunkers, particularly those with Airbnb rentals in maybe more remote locations, but also city centre apartments are saying, come here, it's been deep cleaned, it's a safe place to stay if you need somewhere to stay. Obviously, city officials and public health officials absolutely hated that and shut it down. Here in the UK, Airbnb's business has effectively been closed. It's agreed with authorities that no one, apart from a very, very small number of exceptions, nobody can stay in an Airbnb while the UK remains under lockdown. So, okay, you're an Airbnb host. Where do you put your property? How do you get some money coming in? Some of them have started listing them on some more obscure month-by-month listing platforms. But again, no one's moving around. Some Airbnb hosts, a lot of people have found this quite amusing. If maybe you're not a fan of what Airbnb's done to your city's housing market, some Airbnb hosts have started listing on long-term rental sites. So if your viewers fire up their web browser and head to whatever listings website advertises rental properties in their town or city, they might notice a sudden deluge of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments with towels sort of neatly folded on the end of the bed in the picture and the telltale Nespresso coffee machine gleaming in the kitchen. These are Airbnbs that are being quickly flipped to long-term rentals. But the problem that the Airbnb hosts have, these Airbnb investors, is that no one's moving, no one's renting. So they're stuck with all of these empty units and the bills are piling up.
Oh, man. And especially, a lot of these investors, they might not have invested in just one unit that they have to cover the mortgage for, the mortgage payment for while this is happening. And you point out in the article, they've got one and then another and another. It's a whole almost like a franchise of their collection of rental units, because the more you do, the more, obviously, the more money you make, and it just snowballs from there. Now they've got to cover all of those all at once. And that can, like I said, that can be crippling. If the Airbnb model is so susceptible to such a dramatic decrease, across the board to something like this, what could Airbnb have done differently to protect itself, to protect its hosts, if anything? Or maybe it's too early to really know the answer to that.
Yeah, so let's briefly mention what Airbnb's done, because that was in your earlier question. So Airbnb points to a $250 million fund, which is going to support hosts with cancellations. Something that's really, really annoyed the professionalized Airbnb host community is that Airbnb got rid of cancellation fees. So normally if you cancel an Airbnb, a host can say, well, you owe me a certain percentage of the booking for messing me around. And that would have at least given hosts some income. All cancellation fees are off the table. You can cancel without any penalty. So Airbnb's put in place this $250 million fund. Sounds like quite a bit, but when you think that there are 7 million listings across all of Airbnb, and we're talking about a crisis that might run on for months and months, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a bloodbath. There's also a separate pot for Airbnb super hosts. These are the hosts on Airbnb that have the most wonderful, beautiful, elegant properties that Airbnb uses in its marketing material. They're able to access a portion of a $17 million fund to help with mortgage costs. But in terms of what Airbnb could have done to mitigate this problem on its platform in the first place before it became one, I mean, as I said, the coronavirus pandemic is a stress test for businesses, and businesses that aren't well constructed might find themselves under additional pressures. The additional pressure that Airbnb finds itself under is, like a lot of startups, it's grown too big. It's grown way beyond its initial mission. Brian Chesky, the CEO and co-founder of Airbnb, often talks about the mission of this startup. It's community-driven. Airbnb is nothing without its community of hosts. That's true for a very, very thin veneer right at the top of Airbnb, these sort of sharing economy, tree houses, and beautiful mountaintop villas that you can stay in on Airbnb that it makes a big deal about. But beneath that is this vast slurry of hotel-like rentals being run by some fairly shady characters I found in previous investigations. So what could Airbnb have done? It could have remained true to its sharing economy roots, but it didn't. It expanded into the biggest hotel chain in the world. And I'm sure, like a lot of standard hotel chains, it's finding how painful it is when business completely dries up.
Yeah, absolutely. You just never know what's around that corner. And here we are. So speaking of that, right, around the corner was this big IPO that was going to happen this year. Great valuation. Now we've got this new reality How do we know? I mean, obviously, this is not good for Airbnb's IPO. Do we know whether their plans are still to move forward? I mean, are there adjustments being made? How is that going?
Yeah, well, as I said, they've taken on $1 billion in new debt and $1 billion of new investment with a fairly sharp interest rate on that, according to some sources speaking to press in the United States. So Airbnb is in pretty rocky shape right now. As I said, those booking numbers, they're down nearly 100%. Airbnb is effectively closed. In terms of its IPO happening this year, in terms of this still being Airbnb's year, it's kind of impossible to see that happening right now, isn't it? I mean, we've got a company that effectively has no business model while the world remains on lockdown. And even when lockdowns lift, there are big questions to be asked about how much people will be flying between countries, how much people will want to go on holidays. And if they do go on holiday and travel, will they want to stay in a hotel where they know there'll be a certain standard of cleaning, or will they be happy staying in an Airbnb where who knows how well it's being cleaned, who knows who was staying in it beforehand? And then there's the question of hosts. Airbnb might be able to ride out this crisis, but will its hosts? As I said, these people have built up huge empires, but they're very, very precarious. And if they're not able to pay these rental bills, then they're going to go bankrupt. They're going to fold. And those properties are going to go somewhere else. They might come back to Airbnb under different businesses, but more than likely they'll go to long-term or medium-term rental markets. So there'll be a redressing of the balance between the damage that Airbnb has seemingly done to a lot of cities around the world and the scale of Airbnb. Will it have 7 million listings towards the middle or end of this year? It seems very, very unlikely. And that's going to really impact Airbnb's value. We're already seeing figures floating around that it's maybe only now worth in the region of $12 billion, maybe $15 billion. As I said, fairly recently, it was worth $50 billion, or that was an estimation of its value. So this is a really, really sharp decline for Airbnb, and it's unlikely that it's going to want to go public while it's in this kind of shape.
No kidding. No kidding. Fascinating stuff. I find it very fascinating. James Temperton, wired.co.uk. Definitely go to Wired and check out James's article. And James, if people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can look me up on Twitter. I'm at @JTemperton, so just the first initial and the surname. That's the best place to track me down on Twitter.
Right on, James. Thank you so much for taking time for us today. We appreciate it.
No worries. Good to talk.
All right. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Up next, the convenient choice isn't always the right one, especially when there are some alternatives. More on that rather cryptic tease in a moment. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Expressvpn. You've heard us talk about how important it is to have a VPN. And now that a lot of you are out there working from home, it's even more important to choose a VPN you trust. I like to do research on my sponsors. In fact, we all here at TWiT do research on the sponsors that we invite onto the network and only recommend brands that we believe in. And honestly, ExpressVPN is the best VPN on the market, hands down. And that is because ExpressVPN doesn't log your data. There are lots of incredibly inexpensive and free VPNs that make money by selling your data to ad companies. Well, ExpressVPN was developed in order to make sure that your data is not logged. There's a technology they use called Trusted Server that makes it impossible for ExpressVPN servers to log any of your info. Now, there are lots of other VPNs that I've attempted to use in the past, and the problem is they all slow down your connection so much. You turn it on and you go, okay, well, I'm connected to the VPN now. With ExpressVPN, it's not like that. Internet speeds still remain incredibly fast, and even if I'm connected to a server over in the UK, I can still watch the television shows that I want to watch at speeds that I appreciate. Now, another thing is that ExpressVPN is very easy to use. Unlike other VPNs, you don't have to input or program anything. You just fire up the app, you click the one button to connect, and boom, it's so easy. Anyone in your family can use it. And honestly, it's not just us here at TWiT saying that. Wired, CNET, The Verge, and many other tech journals rate ExpressVPN the #1 VPN in the world. I use ExpressVPN regularly to connect to servers across the pond here in the United States. And in fact, on my iOS devices, I have it pretty much turned on at all times. It's pretty great how even the next day when I swipe up to unlock my phone, the VPN is still connected, so I don't have to worry about not being on that virtual private network. Now, protect yourself with the VPN we use and trust. You can use TWiT's link by going to expressvpn.com/TNW today and get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free on a 1-year package. It's expressvpn.com/TNW. Just go to expressvpn.com/TNW to learn more. Thanks so much to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All righty, folks. I am pleased as punch to welcome OneZero over at Medium, a publication. It's Megan Morrone. Hello, Megan.
Hello, Mikah. How are you?
You know, I'm hanging in there, Megan. What about you?
I know that's the dumbest question now to ask because, we would always just say I'm good, but now it feels weird to say I'm good. But yeah, I'm here.
Now it's like, how much time do you have?
Yeah, it feels dishonest, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I know how you're doing because you published an article over on OneZero talking about trying to find a way to purchase books ethically. And I think that this opens up an even wider discussion on the state of things right now, where we're all, or many of us at least, are trying to find ways to get the things that we need and the things that we desire while still maintaining, ethicality, maintaining ethics. And navigating that world can be exhausting in the best of times, and we're kind of in the worst of times. So could you tell us a little bit about sort of what sparked this article, what happened to cause you to sort of search out an ethical way to purchase online?
So I have such a problematic relationship with Amazon. I think last time I was talking to you two on your show, I was also trying to give up Amazon and failing at it. So about, mid-March, beginning of March, I think if you worked for a tech company, you sort of got especially in San Francisco, you got the feeling that things were not going to be the same maybe a little bit earlier. I wasn't commuting into San Francisco, but I was still doing all the normal things. And I got an email from the library that said, we'll always be open for you. We'll always be open for events. And then the very next day I went to return some of the books that I had. And they were, of course, closed like everything else. They were a non-essential service. And then I went to Copperfields, which is our local bookstore downtown that I love, independent bookstore. They have a few locations in the North Bay, and they were also closed. And, while the Chinese restaurant across the street was still open for takeout and delivery, there was nothing on the door of Copperfields except for saying, we're staying closed to protect everyone. We're sorry. And so my first thought was, well, I need to read books. I know, obviously, I know that there are electronic books. You can still get electronic books from the library. You can get them, of course, from Amazon on the Kindle. But I hate reading electronic books. I've always hated it. I've tried for a decade, and I just can't stand it. We're on the screen all day. My job now is reading all day on a screen, and at the end of the day, I want to read a novel and I want to feel it in my hands. And I think especially now, we all have our little things that we miss and that we love and the things that comfort us. And I think that's okay. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll order from Amazon. And then I thought, you know what? I don't want to order a book from Amazon. I want to continue to support authors, but I want to find a different way. So I went on a little quest, and that is what sparked my journey all around the internet for an ethical way to buy books. Yeah. And that's kind of what you touch on there. I think someone could easily pop in and say, maybe you just skip out on getting new books during this time, or maybe you do this, or maybe you do that. And the fact is, we have
we all have things that bring us comfort, and we're all living through this. And so by default, whether you want to believe it or not, we are all experiencing trauma and living through trauma. And to have those things that provide comfort for us in these times are right and good. And so if yours is having a stack of books that you can read, first of all, more power to you. That's great. But secondly, I think that, that's your thing. I do want to quickly quote you, because it was a fantastic quote in the article. And you were kind of talking about how, toilet paper is another thing that folks are definitely trying to get. And unfortunately, it's difficult to do. And so they are replacing it with other means. And one of those things is a bidet. So the quote is, you can replace toilet paper with a bidet, but there's no bidet for books. Hilarious. But immediately I said, wait, isn't the Kindle the bidet for books? But then you followed up to say, I know that the Kindle's out there, but I don't want the Kindle. And I get where you're coming from with that. There's the smell of the book and the movement of the book and the way that it feels to sort of read through a book and actually see that progress that you make, as well as, like you said, the fact that you're on screens all the rest of the time. Why would you want to be on a screen still? So I definitely respect your choice there. So let's talk about then, what were some alternatives that you came up with in place of Amazon?
Okay, so the first, as I said, I spend a lot of time on the screen. A lot of that screen time is on Twitter. And I saw a tweet from Emily Powell, who runs Powell's, which is one of the biggest independent bookstores. And it's in Oregon, but they've always had an online presence. And I knew that, and they're a good alternative for Amazon. And I saw that they had laid off employees, but then rehired those employees. So I thought, okay, well, that's great. Like, I would love to support that. And they said they're practicing safe distancing measures. Your order might be slow, but, we're going to do it anyway. So I placed my order, and then I just started doing some research, and I saw this article in the LA Times, which said that, the union was calling out Powell's because the people that were hired were not the people that were laid off were primarily union. This is what the LA Times article said, primarily booksellers union people. And the people that were rehired were mostly just management. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm trying to be ethical, and here I am, like, stepping into this, fight for
stepping
workers'
across
rights.
the picket line kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. I was a scab. So I reached out to them, and they said that 2/3 of the people currently working, of the 180 employees, 2/3 of them are part of the booksellers union. And I thought that was great. I should mention that my first job out of college was in a bookstore. I worked at a Borders. Kids, ask your parents what a Borders was, because they don't exist anymore. And there was a fight to be part of the union back then when I worked there. But so I was happy about that. Then I finished that book. I was ordering some cleaning supplies. We also all need cleaning supplies. And I went to Target's website, was ordering stuff. And then I thought, okay, well, there's a book that I want to read. I'm going to throw that in my cart. And, it's like there's the debate, because Target is still open. I could still go there. But, I don't want to necessarily put it's hard to know. Am I putting more strain by going into the store or by ordering? That's the other thing. Like, these people that are delivering our things, whether it's for Amazon or Target or UPS or anything, like, they have a bit of a strain too. So I ordered that book, and then I finished that book. And then I found a place called Bookshop. It's bookshop.org. And when I read it, I was like, oh, look, they're letting independent booksellers buy books and sell books during this time. I thought, that's great. When I looked a little deeper into it, their Bookshop is a B Corp. So they're a corporation, not a nonprofit, but a corporation that's trying to just be an ethical corporation in general. So it's like Patagonia is one of those swell, like, they make those water bottles that has Dash, the fancy water bottles that are really expensive. The
$900 water bottles. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But it's for a good cause. And so I think Target is a little different from Amazon. They are also a giant corporation. I don't know of a lot of. I think they treat their workers pretty well. I know a lot of my daughter's friends are working there, and they get paid well, they get treated well. They've definitely been treated well during this time. Like they've just really sanitary. So I thought, okay, well, that's okay. Mm-hmm. And then I finally realized that I could also probably look at Copperfield's website and see how they're doing. And I went on there, and then I realized that they sell books online too, which obviously this is like a light went on in my head, and I thought, like, of course they do. But it's one of those things in this time is so weird. So like I would have never expected that the store that I could walk to from my home, I would never expect that I would need to order online from them. But like I would never have expected that we would all be home, that you guys will be doing your shows from home. Like just this is a weird time.
None of this is expected, yeah.
Yeah. So I ordered from them and got that book. And I just finished that book last night. That was Ling Ma's Severance, which is about a global pandemic. Highly recommend it. It was
now
weirdly
hold on. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I was. Okay. It was comforting, you say. Tell me how was it comforting?
Well, it was written in 2017, and it's this fictional, it's about a fictional fever that starts in Shenzhen, China, and it's called Shen fever. And it has some real differences to coronavirus, but the similarities to the way people act, the way we continue to sort of try to carry on like everything is normal. I'm digressing from my original story, but I do highly recommend this book, and especially if you can buy it ethically, because it is. I don't know why it's comforting. It's just comforting because you realize, like, this is something that we maybe should have thought of, but could possibly happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great book. So yeah, so this just basically brought up the larger question of Amazon, because obviously, like, there are many, many places to buy books, but I also have a robot vacuum, a Neato robot vacuum. And if you go to the Neato site and you want to replace parts, it only sends you to Amazon. Like, that's where you go. So like, there are definitely like weird things that are very hard to get at other places besides Amazon. But I think it's worth going to the trouble to see if you can buy them locally, to see if you can source them in some alternative way, call the company. Just, some of us, if we're lucky, we have a little bit of extra time on our hands. So I think now more than ever, it's not that hard to actually go take those steps to see if you can find to buy things in other places than Amazon.
Yeah. So it's interesting reading your article, Megan, because we are kind of going through a very similar kind of point in our household as well, particularly my wife. We've shopped at Whole Foods for years. And now, with the state of everything and all of this money just funneling into Jeff Bezos, my wife has started to kind of come to the point of being like, I just don't feel comfortable like continuing to shop at Whole Foods. So this is food versus books, but it's kind of the same thing, right? Like we end up, okay, so then let's shop at some of these other places. Let's go to Oliver's or whatever. And then what you find is that, it's not quite as convenient as it was because we really knew how to shop at Whole Foods. It's way more expensive because stuff just costs more when you're shopping locally versus online. And you just, again and again, it's kind of proves the point of what Amazon has been able to do year after year. It's been able to drive costs down and make it like so incredibly convenient for people that to think about doing it any other way, it just feels like that's impossible. Like, why would I ever do that? Why would I inconvenience myself and pay more for the same thing if we're not doing it for an ethical reason? And it sounds like it's kind of the same with books, but this is Amazon. It's the same with everything because Amazon's got its hands in literally everything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really a good point about food. And then you think about audiobooks and Audible, and you think about maybe you have a Ring doorbell and, are you just going to throw it in the garbage? I have an Eero.
And stomp on it and burn it. No, I'm just kidding.
Which that's okay. Who are you seeing? Who's coming to your door, really, at this point? Like right. The
True.
camera?
That's true. True.
But,
true.
And then the Eero, which is the mesh Wi-Fi system that I have in my house. And we have 5 of us. My husband's a teacher. My 3 kids are in high school. They're all Zooming. We all, at 9 a.m., I have a video meeting. All of them have video classes, and I've had no trouble with Wi-Fi. And I mean, it's not a subscription service. So, I bought it once and then I'm not paying Amazon anymore, but they are slowly gobbling up all of these companies. And that's not even to say about AWS, like that's the backbone of the internet. If you're really going to give up Amazon, like there are a lot of websites that you're not going to be able to go to if you're going to take it to that level. So, I mean, I'm not going to simultaneously bring down Amazon, but just I think what I would rather do is support other local businesses, if possible, maybe not local, but just other businesses, give them the support, especially now, because I think Amazon's argument in the upcoming, in like the past decade, past 5 or 6 years, especially, they've been saying, well, the percentage of goods that people are buying online it's not the majority of goods. It's so low. So yes, we make up a lot of that, but people are still buying things in stores, but now they aren't so much. Obviously, we can still go to grocery stores, but a lot of those non-essential things, you're going to Amazon for them, so they can't make that argument anymore. And we haven't even touched on like the way that they treat their employees, which is another issue that I go to in the article. And yes, they made an announcement early on. They're hiring 100,000 new employees. That was mid-March, I think. And that's great, but that makes such a small dent in the unemployment rate. Like that is not like when you think about all the people in local stores the people who own local stores and work in local stores that have been suffering for the past decade and will continue to more and more, especially when this is over, whatever that means. Yeah, it's just like, it's good to support when you can other people besides Amazon.
Yeah. So that kind of seems to be the big takeaway there at the end, is finding opportunities to support other businesses seems to be the ethical common denominator, where it's something that or least common denominator. Anyway, it's the thing that I'm not a math doctor. It's the thing that we can all do or try to do, which is preferred. Now, there was one thing that you said toward the end of your article, and I quote, "It's probably a lot more ethical than always feeling like you need to have too much, even when it comes to books." When I read that, I did that, amen kind of moment, because I think about that a lot. It kind of depresses me a little bit that there is a store that's called Container Store, where you go and you buy containers to put your other things inside of because you have so many things that you need a thing to hold the things. And that was outside of coronavirus. So this idea that feeling like you need to have too much to be comfortable is not the most comfortable way. It's not the most, it leads to anxiety, and it's certainly not the most ethical way to live. So I thought that was a really good point. I don't know if you want to expound upon that, but I like that.
Well, it's just, I mean, I did have this subscribe and save order for toilet paper. And it was just a thing, like one of my quirks that I didn't think much about, that like I always had way too much toilet paper. Like I have 5 people in my family, but it was just something like some small thing that I felt like I could have control over. Like, we're never going to run out of toilet paper, and it's all because of me. So I just thought, like that's a weird thing that I can look at about myself. Like I don't have to. I never thought about, and I don't think, because I was always buying that much, I don't think I was like upsetting the supply chain at all. But I stopped. And, when I look at how long ago I stopped that order and how we still have too much, I've been just like taking rolls of toilet paper and like dropping them off at friends' houses, like with little bows tied around them. Because I'm like, I just have so much. Aww. I want people to
let me call you up, because I could use a couple bow-tied toilet papers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wish the lesson was like, I finally learned how to read ebooks, but like I can't, I still hate it. And I'm sorry. But the lesson is, I think for me anyway, that just like, I don't have to, like abundance, the fact that like abundance makes me feel this sort of comfort is something worth looking at, because sure. I just think we don't necessarily need to have as much as we always think we do.
I like it.
Yes. Can I ask you one last question before we end this?
Yes.
You mentioned the bidet in the article. Do you have a bidet?
I don't have a bidet. I did grow up with bidets in my home. We bought it from a family, I think a French family, and I always had to explain what they were to people growing up. And so, no, maybe when I run out of toilet paper, I will consider it. But nope. Leo has a bidet. Yeah. I mean, if you want bidet advice, you're right. He's right there.
Bidet shopping guide.
Bidet? Jason?
No. Yeah. No, I do not. Although when all this started happening, of course there was that rush. Like there were bidets that were like selling out, and everything was like, oh, maybe I need to get one of those. Yeah. If it's going to get real bad in the TP industry, like maybe we do need a bidet in this place.
I had intended to get a bidet long before this ever happened, just as a general cleanliness thing, and I never did, and I'm kind of bummed that I didn't, because they're kind of difficult to find now. Well, Megan Morrone, thank you so much for joining us to talk about toilet paper, bidets, books, ethicality, ethics, and waiting while my metaphor was completely ruined due to a Skype dropout at the beginning of the call. We do appreciate you. If people want to follow you online and check out all the great work that you do, where do they go to do that?
Megan Morrone on Twitter, and you can go to OneZero on Medium, just medium.com, or OneZero.medium.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
And we'll see you again soon.
Wish I could high five you right now.
Right? Oh.
There we go. Right on. Take care, Megan. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right. So, story of the week time. I'll go first. I've noticed. So I belong to a service called Bands in Town, it's kind of like a service that tracks the music and the musicians and stuff that you like. It takes a look at your library, and then it'll give you emails and notifications when a band that's in your library is suddenly opens up tickets for a show that's local. Of course, this isn't happening anymore, right? Because musicians aren't touring. No live music is happening in any sort of old, school way. If 2 months ago was old school, there aren't, large, stadium shows being sold out. Nothing like that is happening. Musicians are hurting right now. And I've noticed over the past however many weeks that Bands in Town has started sending out alerts of musicians that are in my collection who are live streaming shows. And it turns out there's a lot of this going on right now. Musicians are turning now, from their homes, they're turning to the internet to live stream their own performances to their fan base. There's a site called Stage It that apparently, like the person who was running it had thoughts about possibly shutting it down in 2020, had been running it for a few years and was thinking that maybe 2020 would be the last year. And then coronavirus happened, and now suddenly it's totally thriving. It's like a platform for musicians to go to and essentially hold live shows for fans online. You can set up like a payment method, that works for you, either charging completely, $15 or whatever you pick, or leaving it open as pay what you want, that sort of stuff, keeping it really flexible, scheduling shows down the line. And I don't know, it reminds me of Bandcamp, which Bandcamp is a music service that I've used for my music, for like releasing like pre-recorded stuff. It's like that, but for live performances. And I wanted to mention this because I know that, obviously, services like Ticketmaster and these venues and everything, obviously they're missing out on insane amounts of money. But the musicians whose entire livelihood is built on supporting, their families and their mortgages and all this stuff by playing at these venues, they're completely dead in the water as far as that is concerned. Their major revenue source is cut. And so sites like this, I just love knowing that they exist and that they're actually thriving right now. There's a bunch of musicians who are getting in on this. Even Radiohead is, they're not using this service, but they're releasing a new unreleased live show from their, mega catalog. every week until they say that the coronavirus is done. Diplo, the famous DJ, is live streaming DJ sets every single day. It's just kind of a way to kind of alert you to the fact that if you need more music in your life, which, let's be real, we all could use a little bit of music to kind of take our minds off of everything. There are infinite resources that you can go to online where even the artists and musicians that you love are putting out music and really tailoring because they're holed up in their house as well. You know, they're spending their time doing these like virtual live shows and everything. And I don't know, it put a smile on my face. I'm trying to find stories that make me happy, and this makes me happy because they're getting paid and people have, you know, a whole new avenue through which to experience some music that they've heard or haven't heard from artists that they love.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. There was a concert earlier this month, I think it was. Yeah, at the beginning of this month that my partner and I were supposed to go to. I had surprised him with tickets for one of his favorite groups. And this was before everything hit, obviously. And of course, then it hit and it was a while. And then finally I heard from them and said, you know, we're rescheduling it for later in the year. And I prefer that personally because if there is an opportunity to go do this in person, I really do like going to concerts in person. But
me too, no doubt.
I love the idea that there are also opportunities for folks to see these shows and participate, interact with their or watch their favorite groups online. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, nothing compares to the live venue, going to the live venue and that whole experience, obviously. But in a moment where we can't do that, like this is an opportunity in many ways to kind of have like front row access. Like it feels different when you're seeing, let's say, your musical idol sitting in their studio live streaming in real time directly to you, and very, you know, very much so in the same way that, you know, podcasters do their live streams online, like we're doing right now, not likening ourselves to like the Rolling Stones or anything, but just saying that this is a way that, you know, people who watch us, they know that when they come here at 11 a.m. Pacific, they are watching something that is being recorded at that moment. We're literally like looking into a camera, and on the other side of that camera is that person.
Yes.
It's a great way to connect. And here's a way to do that with like the musicians that you may idolize and also kind of keep them going. They're probably not going to stop playing music because they aren't making money, but this helps them kind of thrive and survive, and everybody wins. So yeah. I think it's cool to see that. I should also mention Billboard has a fantastic running, always updated list of live streams and virtual concerts. If you want to go there, you can just kind of bookmark that and check in on it. And they're always adding new things as they catch wind of different artists and musicians that are holding some of these things. So you can go there and see if someone you like is on there and check it out. And you've got, you know, an hour of your evening filled.
Very cool. My story is also, I think, some exciting news. At least the folks who have been reporting on it and the folks that are part of the FCC group are very excited about it. It was a unanimous vote where FCC has said, we're going to allow Wi-Fi into the 6 gigahertz band. So this is new bandwidth that will be provided for Wi-Fi 6E. This is a big deal in the sense that we are looking at more than twice the bandwidth of current 5 gigahertz devices. So there's 2.4 gigahertz and there's 5 gigahertz that are available right now. 2.4 gigahertz, it doesn't have as much bandwidth, but it is because the band is not as wide and the frequency or the stream is smaller, it can go through walls and people and other things a lot better. So longer distance devices throughout your home, especially Internet of Things devices and devices like that, are able to maintain a connection. 5 gigahertz, of course, is faster, but you do, as that band gets wider, it doesn't go through things as well. And so you usually use those for the big devices that are within some sort of range of the router. So your MacBook Pro or whatever laptop you happen to have, your phone and things like that. It provides for more data to be sent, but it does not go through things as well. So the farther away you get and the more things that are in between you and it, the less good the connection. The 6 gigahertz band then, of course, would be even worse at going through a bunch of different walls and things like that. However, you do get even better speeds. It's up to 7 160 megahertz channels. And because this is a whole new chunk of the spectrum, that means that there are far fewer devices that are going to be competing for attention. 2.4 gigahertz, there's so many devices on the 2.4 gigahertz range right now that take up so much space. And so you have issues where signals kind of hit each other and bounce around, and it causes issues with connection, with latency. With 5 gigahertz, there are less, and with 6, it's just going to be those few 6 gigahertz devices that you have. So that means lower latency with those. The FCC group, the folks that are kind of talking about the FCC's ruling, they said that we will likely see the first 6 gigahertz or 6E devices later this year, and then many, many more in 2021, where they will really be ramping up production. And one of the things in the article that we'll include in the show notes pointed out the fact that this was a quote, that it pairs well with 5G. So if you think about it right now, 5G is rolling out slowly but surely, and that is going to provide for faster speeds and more bandwidth. And then to have this rolling out at the same time, it really kind of ramps up our connectivity possibility quite a bit. So this is exciting for anybody, especially those of us who have to run to the store or have someone else run to the store and get a dongle so that you can run an Ethernet cord to your laptop or your computer. At some point, we're going to get to a place where the wire will no longer be necessary because we can get same or similar speeds with just Wi-Fi. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's why every time I do one of these podcasts, I have this huge roll of Ethernet coil that I literally run out of this room, around the corner, down the stairs, into the living room, and plug it into the router. I do that every single time I podcast. And then when I'm done, I roll it all up and bring it up here so nobody trips over it.
So I scream while you're doing it?
Sometimes I record it and release it on Twitter. Check my Twitter feed. See the video I've done there.
I just imagine myself at the end of the cord going, ah!
At this point, I'm so used to it. It's just like, okay, and then throw it down the stairs and plug it in.
Those garden hose rolly things. You could get one of those for Ethernet cord.
Oh, man. Well, if I had any more room in the corner of my bedroom, I might think to do that. I've already got like this growing pile of stuff over here because it's the only corner that's out of view. Because I want this to still feel like a normal bedroom as well. So it's like I keep all of my work stuff like in this pile over here, hidden, which makes getting things really difficult. But hey, we do what we can. I'm super excited about this. I think this is many people were oh, you're playing the video. I didn't realize. Okay. Well, yes. Go to my Twitter feed. You'll find a video where I show you my step-by-step walkthrough of how I set up for one of these shows. Hopefully you enjoy it. And anyways, I'm going to stop watching because it's going to distract me. I'm looking forward to this. I know that broadcasters and utility companies weren't super thrilled about this because they had licensed uses for this spectrum initially, but there are a whole lot of other ways that it can be used and that it will be used. This is also, I mean, it may be obvious, but FCC is U.S. only. So it's here in the U.S. that we're going to see this spectrum opening up. When you're talking about Europe as one example, they're still waiting on individual countries to kind of allow for this as well as the EU. So they're behind the effort compared to the U.S. But I imagine this is the kind of thing that will kind of start trickling down into other markets as well.
Yeah, especially once you start to see the benefits, because that's what in the article it talks about. That's kind of what drove this through so quickly. The FCC could have delayed longer on making a ruling, but they chose to push it through based on the arguments and evidence that was presented to suggest that, at this point, internet should be a basic right. But we have to come as close as we can to that and make sure that people's lives are positively affected by these ways to connect to the internet. And so that includes making it better, faster, stronger, all of those necessary words. So yeah, pretty cool.
Definitely cool. Looking forward to it. All right. Tech News Weekly is done. Another episode. We appreciate you watching and listening each and every week. We publish the show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is the show page. Go there, subscribe. That's all you really need to know. Audio and video formats there. Subscribe, and then it'll be delivered to you automatically through the magic of RSS.
And if you'd like, you can send us an email, tnw@twit.tv. And of course, follow us on social media. That's at Twit on Twitter. That's at TwitTV on Instagram. Or excuse me, at twit.tv on Instagram, at Twit Talk on TikTok. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Mikah Sargent on pretty much all of the social networks, including Twitter. Later on today, I've got a hands-on iOS out. Thank you, Mr. Ashley, where I am talking about using family sharing. Get those subscriptions you've got, Apple Music and the apps, the different app purchases, and Apple News Plus and Apple TV. All those things, share them with your family. Share your storage space. Family sharing is an incredible tool, and I talk to you all about it on Hands on iOS. It's coming out later today.
Nice. Twit.tv/HOI for Hands on iOS.
Thank you.
I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. My show that I'll plug is Hands on Android. It's kind of similar to iOS, except if you're an Android fan, you'll get some fun stuff that applies to you over there. Twit.tv/HOA. This week's episode that just published moments ago. Thank you, John Ashley, for editing and publishing that. Is all about removing bloatware from your phone. You ever get an Android phone and it's got like Facebook installed and you try and uninstall it and it doesn't let you uninstall it. It's like baked into the OS. I show you some ways to get rid of it. Get rid of it mostly, let's say, with a little bit of an asterisk there. So twit.tv/HOA to check that out. And thanks to everybody who helps us do this show each and every week. Of course, John and Burke at the studio, always pitching in. We really appreciate their efforts. And thanks to you for watching and listening each and every week to Tech News Weekly. We'll see y'all next week. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.